morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Issues for the state before we bring the jury in?
Just one, Judge.
Yes, sir.
We do have a minor testifying today. She would likely be testifying this morning. She was a minor when the act happened, and she still is. I don't know if any representatives of the media are in here, but I know they're running a pool in here. Your Honor, I know usually when we have the local pools and things like that, we don't have a problem with us. But just to make sure it's certain the minor's protected, because there are live feeds and things like that, I would ask Your Honor to, during the testimony of this witness, to basically, as we have been doing on breaks, to have the pool feed be muted, so there is no sound during that testimony, and that no cameras show the minor or identify her in any manner, shape, or form. We're not asking to just cut off the feed or anything like that, but to protect the child in that manner from any disclosure of her identity, we would ask that she be protected in that manner. Okay, so the protection you're asking for is that she not be identified in any way, and that when do you want the feed muted? When she testifies. I don't expect it's going to be a lengthy testimony, but during her testimony, because I think if we just try to stop it at the beginning when we ask her name and stuff, there's still the chance for inadvertent saying her name and things like that during her testimony. Well, I think it's the court's discretion, but does the defense have any position in this regard?
How old is this witness at this time?
She's 17 right now. She was 15 at the time.
Right. She's an adult, so we're going to object.
Minors less than 18, Judge.
It's within my discretion, and I think there's statutory authority. The legislature considered this an area worthy of protecting persons of this age and this status, and it's my intent to follow the legislative intent, so I'm going to grant the state's motion over the defendant's objection. Mr. Sharon, would you communicate with the press? The witness is not to be identified, and the feed is to be muted while she's testifying.
So all her testimony cannot be recorded?
Yes. Any other issues for the state?
Not for the state.
And for the defense?
No, ma'am.
First thing I'll do is give them the instruction regarding Exhibit 3, and then we'll be calling our first witness and moving forward with evidence. Mr. Chestnut, bring the jury, please.
Let's all rise for the jury, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. We're ready to resume the case, and I need to give you an instruction regarding a piece of evidence that was submitted by the defendant a week ago. It was Exhibit 3, and I did not allow it into evidence. So I want to tell you about that. I reconsidered my ruling, and I am going to allow Defendant's Exhibit 3 into evidence. That would be, it was last week during the testimony of Cobb County Police Officer Gallimore, and the defense entered into evidence a copy of Officer Gallimore's police report. I ruled it out of evidence at that time. I've reconsidered my ruling not to allow it into evidence, and I am going to allow it into evidence. Now, what does that mean for you? As I told you, evidence comes to you in two ways. One is from the witness stand by people that are placed under oath and subject to examination. The other is by physical items that are marked and identified for purposes of the court's record and then offered and allowed by the court into evidence. So there's both. There's physical evidence now in the case and there's testimonial evidence. Defense Exhibit 3 is physical evidence, and it will be part of all the other evidence that you will have to consider. So it becomes part of that collective evidence, and it's one of the items that you will have in your jury room when you deliberate for your evaluation and consideration after I give you legal instructions. So that said, Defense Exhibit 3 is now in evidence. Any objections by the state to the court's curative instruction?
No, Your Honor.
By the defense?
No, ma'am.
We're ready to proceed with evidence. Call your next witness.
Detective Ralph Escamillo.
You do solemnly swear affirm the testimony that you give to the court, hearing on this, not pending will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated.
Sir, if you will, state your full name, spell it for our court reporter.
My name is Ralph Escamillo. It's R-A-L-P-H. Last name is E-S-C-A-M-I-L-L-O.
And could you please describe to the jury where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed by the Cobb County Police Department.
And where specifically do you work, what unit with Cobb County PD?
I'm currently assigned to the Cobb County Police Department Crimes Against Persons Unit, robbery homicide.
I want to talk a little bit about your background in law enforcement. How long have you been with Cobb County Police Department total?
I've been with Cobb County Police Department just over 19 and a half years. Prior to this assignment in homicide, I was with the Marietta Organized Crime Intelligence Unit as a surveillance agent. We did vice crimes, prostitution, gambling, white-collar crimes. Prior to that, I was a crimes against children detective with the Special Victims Unit for about almost 6 years. And then I was a uniform patrol officer down in South Cobb County for about 3 years.
Okay. And when is it that you actually transitioned into the robbery homicide unit or the crimes against persons unit?
I transferred in there March of 2014.
Okay. So you were only in there a couple of months when this investigation began, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Just prior to that, had you done some work with the MCS, is what we call it, the Marietta Cobb Smyrna Task Force?
Yes, I specifically worked for them for just over 9 years.
And you're obviously a post-certified police officer, correct?
I am.
When you worked with them for that 9 years, explain how your role as an investigator was different than it is now as a detective with the Crimes Against Persons unit.
Working with the MCS unit, you work in an undercover capacity, plain clothes, street clothes, anything from blue-collar dress to business suits. You investigate vice crimes, as I said, gambling, prostitution, money laundering. We also do long-term investigations and large-scale narcotics interdiction. Cases related to that.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about your role in this particular case in just a second. You had some involvement with the last witness this jury heard from last week, Ms. Danielle Dorr. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Before we get into that, I want to talk about prostitution investigations in general and how you worked those in general as an investigator with MCS prior to transitioning to the Crimes Against Persons unit, okay?
Yes, in general,
I'm just going to object to that whole line of questioning.
Yes.
Well, because Mr. Harris is charged with the offense of prostitution, and so whatever testimony this officer would give about his work in that area, it's not relevant to any issue that we have.
It's perfectly permissible. It's foundational questions to lead to how he conducted this investigation and identified Ms. Doer and confirmed her identification in the investigation.
You can proceed.
Thank you. I was asking you about investigations in general involving prostitution. Can you explain to the jury how you as an undercover officer would conduct investigations in prostitution and solicitation?
yes, in general, with prostitution investigations, we either receive complaints from local police departments because we're a task force, and we handle different areas around the county and handle those prostitution complaints in reference to street walking prostitution. We also receive complaints from hotel owners, apartment management in reference to organized prostitution or escorting occurring in these businesses or facilities. And we work undercover operations where we have a team of agents that go in plain clothes. Your support team is marked up in uniform police attire. If I was the undercover operative, I would make telephonic contact with the suspected target or prostitute or escorts. At that time, we would form a plan of action, and we would go ahead and meet at an undisclosed location near the area. We'd finalize the plans and security safety issues, and then at that point, my recorder as well as my transmitter would be activated so all the supporting units could hear me. And I would either go into a hotel, apartment complex, a residence, or if it was in my vehicle, for street operations, and the agents that were supporting me would monitor everything. They would be in constant visual contact and audio contact up until I went into the residence. At that point, the state law requires that you meet certain elements for it to be an act or commission of prostitution. There has to be an agreement of terms of money for sexual act, and after that has occurred, then we identify ourselves as police officers. There is a prearranged takedown signal that is given over the transmitter, and at that point, the supporting agents would come in and either knock or would be allowed into the premises by myself or by the escort or prostitute, and at that point, they would either be detained or taken into custody.
Now, are you familiar with Backpage or Backpage.com?
I am.
And have you, during the course of your work as an undercover officer investigating prostitution, have you become aware that sometimes escorts and prostitutes use Backpage to sell their services?
Yes, sir.
All right. And describe, if you will, do you usually have a single contact with a person in your investigation, or does it sometimes require multiple contacts before you can actually get to the point where you're about to make an arrest?
Sometimes it takes multiple contacts. It's really depending upon the escort or prostitute. Generally, you find an ad or advertisement that they're posting. You make the initial phone call. They advise you whether the area they're in and whether they're available and the terms or the price. Then they tell you to call them when you're back in the area or near the area that they give you, and you make a secondary phone call. That secondary phone call, they would usually give you the location of the hotel and sometimes the room number. Sometimes they would have you make a third phone call once you were in the parking lot, so they could give you a specific room number. And the reason is sometimes they have visual, they can see the parking lot when you come into the parking lot, and they want to make sure that you're not law enforcement.
In this particular case, you were given a fairly specific role in terms of looking at what I'm referring to as the defendant's work phone number call history. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And for that work phone number, do you have your report in front of you?
Yes.
Do you recall what that phone number was?
For Ms. Doer or the other target number?
For the defendant's work phone.
The defendant's work phone number, yes, the last four would be 9087.
Okay. And looking at the phone records for 9087, did you see a phone number in those records when you reviewed them, 678-360-0318?
I did.
Okay. And looking at that number in particular, this jury heard about on Friday, Ms. Doer gave some testimony about that. Did you see that number in the defendant's call detail from his work phone?
I did. I was given a call log from Mr. Harris's phone. This call log was given to me by supervision, and it was derived from his work cellular telephone, and it was from the call log history on that phone when they did the forensics on it.
Specifically looking at the date of May the 31st of 2014, did you see that phone number in the call log?
I did. I saw it in the call log 3 times.
And do you have those times for the jury?
I'm sorry, let me refer to my report real quick.
If you don't have the exact time.
I know I saw it somewhere. It was all relatively within the same time frame of maybe approximately 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay, but May 31st of 2014.
That's correct.
All right. Based on seeing that phone number there, did you do any research, or were you able to associate that phone number with Backpage in any way?
I did. Mr. Harris's phone was already identified to us, and I knew who he was by the high-tech unit giving me that information. The other number, which belonged to Ms. Dower, I entered into the Google search engine on my computer. At that time, it generated, just to see what it would generate, it generated a ad for Backpage under the adult section escort service, or escort services. At that time, I clicked on the link, and it showed that she was posting that she was working in the Marietta area and that she was offering services. I believe the services were a quick visit, half hour or an hour, and it gave the denominational amounts that you need to pay for those services. And it had her phone number that I listed on my report, which was 678-360-0318. I also noted that there was other links on there that I clicked on relatively close to the Backpage posting, and these are also links for escort services as well. Not necessarily ones that she posted, but they're generated by the customers.
Okay. Once you found this phone number, Ms. Doer's number, on the May 31st, 2014 call detail from the defendant's work phone, did you come up with some sort of game plan with your unit about how you would attempt to make contact with her to confirm her relationship with the defendant? I
did. What we discussed was that we needed to confirm who was holding this phone number and whether they're still in possession of the handset of this that was listed on this phone number and the ad. My Sergeant Wheeler, and Agent Alan Panchaman assisted me with this portion of the operation. It was discussed that I would make a phone call under the premise that I was a customer or a John in street slang. At that point, I would arrange a date or services with the individual if they answered the phone. And I would go ahead and set up a time and then show up at that location if the appointment was made, and I would make contact with that individual and verify who they were.
Now, was your plan of action to actually arrest her for the charge of prostitution, or was it otherwise?
No, it was otherwise. From the very beginning of the operation, it was decided that we were going to go ahead and not arrest the individual, that we needed to make contact with them to confirm and corroborate the phone number information. And the reason was we were working for a larger investigation. We needed to find out who this person was.
All right. I want to direct your attention to September the 8th of 2014. Is this the date that you began this operation that you just described for the jury?
It is.
And why don't you describe for the jury what specifically you did after coming up with this game plan with your command staff?
We identified the area by the phone call. I called the number, and a female answered the phone, and she asked me if I was interested in arranging a date. At that point, I did tell her that I was interested, and I was interested in either a half hour or an hour date that I would decide, which. She told me that if I was interested, to go ahead and proceed to her area, which was the Franklin Road, Marietta area. Our office is probably about 20 minutes from there, so I told her I would have about a 30-minute travel time. We proceeded to the area, and we met at an undisclosed location that is near the hotel, which was the Econo Lodge. At that point, we discussed safety and security issues in the brief, made sure that the transmitter was transmitting. We had arranged the takedown signal. We all agreed on it. And at that point, I told them that I was going ahead and make the second call. I made the second phone call, and the female told me that she was at the Econo Lodge to pull into the main entrance and go around the right side of the building to the lower level and to park my vehicle. Once I parked my vehicle in the parking lot, she advised me to make a third phone call. This was not unusual, and I understood the process from previous investigations. I was also familiar with this hotel because we have done some operations at this hotel before. At that time, I told her that I was a few minutes out, I was in the area, and I would proceed to her location. Agent Panchame and Sergeant Wheeler preceded me by heading to the hotel first, which was standard, and they set up in the parking lot and gave me a visual of what they saw, if there was anybody lying in wait or how many people were outside. This was done by telephone. At that time, I told them I was going to proceed to that location, and I drove to the Econo Lodge, and I parked my vehicle towards the right side, back side of the building, where it was out in the open, and you could see it. During that time, Agent Panchame, I turned the transmitter on, I tested it, gave some keywords, and at that time, Agent Panchame called me and he advised me they had me loud and clear and that we were ready to go. At that point, I gave them, told them that I was going to call her. I called her. She gave me the room number, and at that point, I gave them the room number once I hung up, and I proceeded into the side of the hotel to the lower level. In these operations, safety is paramount. So once I had her room number, I walked past her room farther down the hallway just to make sure and do a security sweep to make sure there was nobody laying in wait to rob me or to do any kind of harm to us.
Once you were satisfied that it appeared to be a safe setting for you and your support officers, what did you do?
At that point, I returned back to the room. And I went ahead and knocked on the door. Within about 10, 15 seconds, a white female opened the door.
That's later identified as Ms. Dover, correct?
Yes, later identified as Daniela Dover.
And once you spoke to her, did you recognize her voice as being the same voice with whom you had contact on the phone?
It did sound similar.
Okay.
At that point, she invited me into her room. I entered the room, and the door was shut. Again, for safety and security reasons, we have a plan of action where you walk deep into the room, past the beds to make sure no one's lying in wait, and also by the curtains and the desk and stuff to make sure that there's nobody there to do you harm or any weapons out in the open.
Did you see anything like that when you did this cursory sweep?
I did a real quick cursory search when I walked in. The bathroom was there as well as the closet that was open. Walked past that, looked at the beds, the curtains, didn't see anything, and then I recentered myself in the room where the other agents would know that if anything happened in an emergency, I was supposed to be centered in the room. At that point, I said some hellos to Ms. Dower, and I gave her some official U.S. currency, MCS Smart funds, handed it to her, and she accepted the funds. At that point, I went ahead and lifted my shirt, and I showed my waistband, which had my Cobb County Police Department detective badge on there, and I identified myself verbally as a law enforcement officer.
Had you also given the signal that you were ready for the takedown?
Yes. At that point, I gave the signal. It was probably about 20 to 30 seconds, and there was a knock at the door. We both walked over, Ms. Dower and I opened the door, and Sergeant Wheeler, as well as Alan Panchame, walked into the room at that time, and they were both marked in like badges and police vests and stuff like that.
What was Ms. Dover's reaction once you identified yourself as a police officer and brought in your backup?
She seemed extremely startled. She put her hands up over her mouth, and she seemed like she was in shock, taken aback. And at that point, I told her to calm down, everything was going to be okay, and that I wanted to talk to her.
Okay. I assume you got the cash back that you had given her for the transaction, is that correct?
Immediately, she was still holding it, and at that point, I took it back.
All right. And after you showed her the badge, did you disclose to her that you were actually investigating some sort of other crime, not primarily the prostitution?
I did. I told her that not to worry about what was going on right now, that I wanted to speak to her about some phone calls that were made to her, and I wanted to know if she could tell me who the number belonged to or if she remembered the phone calls coming in.
Did you read her Miranda rights?
I did. I advised her of her Miranda rights out of an abundance of caution, and at that time I told her again that she was not under arrest and she wasn't being charged with the crime, that I was merely following up with another investigation that was unrelated to this.
While we're on that topic, did you see any marijuana out in the open or anything like that?
No. When I did the security sweep, I looked for any kind of illicit items as well as weapons. In the obvious places out in the open, I did not see anything.
Were you investigating a marijuana transaction or whether she possessed marijuana, or what was your primary focus of your investigation?
My primary focus was the homicide investigation in reference to a child death.
All right. And once you shared that with her and once you read Miranda, did she agree to waive her rights to speak to you about what she knew about this case?
She did. Ms. Dower advised me that she did understand her rights. She was willing to waive her rights, and she told me that she wanted to cooperate. I told her again that she was not under arrest, and I asked her if she wanted to speak to me in her room or if she'd rather go outside or away from the room and speak to us outside.
What was her preference?
She advised me that she'd rather sit inside her room and talk inside of her room because she didn't want everybody else to know her business.
Okay. And did you speak to her to confirm what you had already found from defendant's phone records about her interaction with the defendant from May the 31st of 2014?
Yes, I asked her that, or I told her that some phone calls had been made to a phone number, and I believe the phone number was hers that was listed in the ad, and she confirmed that it was.
So you confirm that 678 phone number that we just discussed as being hers?
Yeah, she stated it was the same phone number that I had called.
Okay.
So at that point, I told her that somebody had called her 3 times, and that I wanted to make sure or confirm whether she remembered the phone calls and whether that she actually handled those phone calls. At that time, she told me that she would go ahead and use something called an e-bill or electronic bill. It's where you can log on to a tablet or a computer, and you can look at your phone bill real time on the phone, and you can actually look at line items there and see who called, whether they were outgoing or ingoing.
Now, did you ask her to do that, or did she offer to do that on her own once you told her what you're investigating?
No, she offered to do that on her own. I told her, in fact, that it wasn't necessary for her to show me it if she didn't want to, and she advised me no, she wanted to cooperate. And at that time, she logged onto her tablet, and she started researching the number, and she asked me what the number was. She went looking through her records, and she did locate that number.
So the 470 ends with a 9087. Did you actually see that in her records consistent with what you'd seen in the defendant's call detail?
Yes, she held her tablet up, and when she was going down the line items, and she goes, here they are right here. And then she showed me, and we read out loud the number, and we confirmed that it in fact was the same number.
From that same date, that would be May the 31st of 2014.
May 31st, 2014, that is
Okay.
correct.
After you had that double confirmation of being able to look at it, did you talk to her about the transactions that she had with the defendant?
I did. I asked her if she remembered anything about those transactions or those phone calls. She advised me that she believed that it was a white male, and the reason is because she usually dates African-American men in general. She also told me at that time that she uses 2 different hotels, the Econo Lodge that we were currently at, and across the street there's a Ramada Inn right next to a quick trip service station. She says they're relatively close to each other, so she uses those because she's familiar with them, and she can also use the store as well. She told me at this particular time she was over at the Ramada. I believe she said that the other hotel was closed for renovation or something to that effect, and that she remembers it specifically because when the customer showed up, he was a white male, and she usually, like I said, she dates African Americans. She also stated that she remembered that it was a 30-minute session for the amount of $125 cash, and that what she remembered from the session was very bland, or vanilla is the term she used, and there was nothing very exciting or anything that stood out from it.
Okay. Let me ask you a few questions regarding that. Did she describe how long she was actually with the defendant performing these sex acts?
She stated that she saw him for the 30-minute session. She couldn't remember if it went the full 30 minutes, but that's what he had paid for, and that during the session she did protective fellatio on him, as well as protected sexual intercourse with him in the bedroom.
In terms of her degree of attention with the defendant and her description of the defendant, did she give you any of that?
Yes, she stated that he was a white male, kind of tall, and in her words, she stated that he was kind of fat or fluffy and frumpy or slouchy.
And I think you already said this, white male, correct?
Correct.
At some point, did you have a photograph of the defendant?
Yes, initially when we came in, I told her I wanted to discuss the phone numbers. I had possibly called her, and I read her Miranda rights, and she read those, and at that time I showed her a photograph.
And did you do that to confirm what you had already found from the record?
Yes, Mr. Harris had already been identified through the phone records and through the investigation, so I already knew who he was. So what I did was I printed a book and photo of Mr. Harris, but it was a sanitized version where there was no information around the picture, such as his height, weight, name, date of birth, or anything like that. Printed it in color, and then I showed it to her.
This is states 323. Is this a fair and accurate copy of the photograph that you would have showed her back then?
Yes.
Okay. And just to refresh the jury's recollection, they saw this on Friday with Ms. Dorr. When you showed her this photograph, did she confirm that this is the person that she had sexual relations with?
Yes, she believed that that was him. I asked her what her percentage was as far as what she believed. Was it 100% certainty that that was the individual that she saw? And she advised me she was only 90% sure. The 10% was that she couldn't remember what clothing he was wearing when she saw him when he came.
All right. And after you spoke with Ms. Doerr, did she agree that she would continue to cooperate with you and your detectives in the investigation?
Yes, at that time, again, I advised her that she wasn't being charged with a crime. She was free to leave, and that I was going to give her a business card, and for her to give me a call on that business card if she had any further details or information that might come up later down the road that she may remember, or if she had any questions. At that time, I provided her with the business card, and we departed the room.
Was there an actual recording of your discussion with her?
The transmitter that we use is a transmitter recorder. It's probably about the size of a pager or a small wallet. During this operation, it was transmitting. It does tend to get very hot depending on the time that you use. And when I went back to the office and tried to download the information, the verbal recordings, it said that there was no data on there, so apparently a malfunction.
Despite that, were there two other officers that were present for the entirety of your conversation with Mr. Doerr?
Yes, my immediate supervisor, Sergeant Wheeler, was present, and Agent Alan Pancherme. They were both standing there face-to-face with us.
Okay. I now want to move away a little bit from that topic because your name's been mentioned by a high-tech investigator from last week. Did you also have some kind of administrative role with this investigation or support role for Detective Stoddard who's sitting here in the courtroom?
I did. Some of the tasks that I had were if they needed any kind of printouts or they needed me to go do any follow-ups or anything like that, that they would ask me to do it. In reference to the high-tech, every now and then I would go over to the high-tech department to see how everything was going, if there was anything that they needed. And on an occasion, I believe Detective Yeager handed me some discs and advised me to deliver these to Detective Stoddard from the high-tech unit to the person's office, which is about, I'd say, 150, 200 feet away.
Other than the analysis of the defendant's work phone call detail from May the 31st of 2014, did you have any involvement with the actual analysis of these additional discs that high-tech provided, or was that left to some other detectives?
No, that was left to other detectives. Merely Detective Yeager handed me these discs. They were in envelopes, and I walked over the 150, 200 feet and handed them to Detective Stoddard, who was in the office.
In addition to this, were you tasked with another detective at some point to go to a Chick-fil-A in Cobb County to pick some things up?
Yes, I was tasked to go to the Chick-fil-A over on Paces Ferry at Cumberland Boulevard, and I was asked to go see the management who was supposed to provide me with receipts, cash register receipts, from the morning of the incident, as well as video. And these were given to me and placed in an envelope, and I immediately took those back to the office and I delivered them to Detective Stoddard.
This is State's Exhibit 230, and I don't need to get you to come down, the jury's already seen this, but looking at 230, is this a fair and accurate depiction, aerial depiction of the area where the Chick-fil-A was that you went to?
Yes, it is.
And do you see the Chick-fil-A marked there kind of in the middle of this area?
Yes, I do.
All right. And specifically, were you looking for transactions from June the 18th of 2014 when you went to that Chick-fil-A?
Yes, Detective Duncan and I were tasked to go to the restaurant, and we were given a point of contact, and we were supposed to meet with the manager who was on duty, and that manager was going to provide us with the receipt of the morning of the incident, and as well as a copy of the video on a CD that captured some images or video of Mr. Harris and Cooper in the restaurant that morning.
So for our record, was that Manager Jason Bellotti that you met with?
Correct.
Okay. And when you met with him with your Detective Duncan, did you receive both of those things, copy of some receipts that they had from their records as well as the video from Chick-fil-A?
I did, and I turned those directly over to Detective Stoddard once I drove those back to the office.
Did you actually review those items, or was that part of your responsibilities, or merely to pick them up?
Merely to pick them up. It was my responsibility to look into those.
Primary task and primary reason for your testimony involved the Doerr incident. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have to tell you. Thank you.
If I can have just one more.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Let me start with the Chick-fil-A. You went on June the 23rd,
Yes, that date sounds correct.
and you took custody of cash register receipts
Correct.
and 2 discs containing surveillance video of June the 18th, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And have you reviewed those receipts?
No, they were given to me in an envelope, the discs and the receipts, and I drove back to the office and I gave them to Detective Stoddard, who is the lead case agent.
Okay, so you never opened it up, looked at them?
No.
Right, but you became aware or you were advised somehow that the receipt times were incorrect?
Yes, when I picked up the receipt from Mr. Bellotti, who's the store manager, he advised me that the timestamps on the receipt as opposed to the video were 18 minutes faster than the actual time. And I notated that down and I advised in my report that there was a difference in time.
Okay, that the receipts were faster than the actual time?
Yeah, Mr. Bellotti advises that the register receipts and the video times are 18 minutes faster than the actual time. So if it was 9 a.m. On the register, the video, I believe, would be 9:18 a.m. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay.
I guess you could look at it from the receipt of the video.
Well, was it your understanding that the cash register time and the video time were the same? They were just 18 minutes too fast?
Correct.
Okay. That's what you were told?
Yes, Mr. Bellotti told me that.
You indicated that you did a couple of other things. Detective Yeager provided you with a copy of Ross's iPhone 5 forensic analysis report.
Correct.
All right. And you're a detective, right?
Yes.
Right. But you didn't analyze that.
That was not my job function in this investigation. Everybody's assigned different functions, and my function was to go follow up on leads and stuff, such as the door incident. And this was merely discs that were handed to me and asked to be delivered to Detective Stoddard.
And you didn't write any report on that, did you?
No, I did not.
All right. Detective Yeager also provided you with a forensic analysis report on Leanna Harris's MacBook Pro, some select data. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
You didn't review that?
I didn't view that. I merely hand-delivered it to Detective Stoddard.
Okay. And you didn't write a report on that either?
No, I didn't.
And at another time, Detective Yeager provided you with the forensic analysis report on a Lenovo computer,
Correct.
and you didn't review that?
No, I did not.
And you didn't write a report on that either?
No, I did not.
So is that all the matters that you handled in this case?
Yes, sir.
When you set up the sting with Miss Dorr, did you know who she was?
No, I had no prior knowledge of Ms. Dover prior to that operation.
Okay. But you knew the area was an area where a lot of prostitutes worked?
It is one of the areas in the county.
Okay. Franklin Road area?
Yes.
Six Flags Drive in another area?
Yes, it could be, yes.
Okay. Are those the two primary areas where prostitutes work in Cobb County?
There's several dozen. I mean, it's all over the place.
Several dozen areas or several dozen hotels?
Several dozen areas.
Okay. And how big was your vice unit at the time when you were working?
My best recollection, there was maybe 5 or 6 agents and 2 supervisors.
Okay. All right, but you didn't know her?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Had you reviewed Backpage previously and seen her name or her phone number?
No. Prior to Ms. Doer's operation, the operation that we did, I was tasked with looking through Craigslist, Backpage, as well as other electronic websites,
Okay.
but I do not recall specifically looking at her or seeing her number prior to this.
Okay. Are you aware of how long she'd been operating in the county at that time?
I believe she told me that she lived in the northern portion of just outside of Cobb,
Okay.
and that she had come down to the Franklin Road area. I can't remember exactly. Maybe Cherokee County was the area she had come from.
All right. And you knew she was on probation?
I didn't know that she was on probation. I asked her during the contact we had with her, and it's usually a general question that I ask everyone I make contact with in the context of police work, such as, do you have any guns, knives, drugs, bombs? Are you on probation or parole?
Okay. And she told you she was on probation
I believe she did.
for marijuana?
She just said she was on probation.
And you didn't follow up with what she was on probation for?
No, my main task here was not investigating a prostitution or marijuana complaint. We're investigating a homicide where a child had died.
What marijuana complaint?
I just said we weren't investigating a marijuana complaint or a prostitution complaint.
All
We are
right.
investigating a homicide where a child had died.
All right, well, you certainly agree that when you walked into her room, you were sort of hit with an overwhelming odor of marijuana, weren't you?
I didn't say that. I wouldn't agree to that.
You didn't smell marijuana?
I didn't. I smelled cigarette smoke.
Can you think of any reason why Miss Dorr would just make up the fact that her room stank of marijuana?
Objection, I would call for speculation.
Have you smelled marijuana before?
I have.
And your testimony is when you walked in there, you didn't smell any marijuana.
No, I didn't smell any marijuana in the room. I remember the room smelling like smoke when I walked in. The exterior hallways, there was people walking through that were smoking cigarettes as well. That's what I remember.
Okay. Do you recall having any discussion with Ms. Dorr about the fact that you were not going to either arrest her for marijuana or seize her marijuana?
No, I have specifically told Ms. Doer that she was not under arrest for the prostitution that was occurring.
All right. Did you tell her that you weren't going to arrest her for a probation violation since she was on probation and you had her dead to rights for solicitation?
Never told her that.
But you certainly could have arrested her for that.
Could have.
And you were aware, or she made you aware actually, that she had actually just gotten out of jail when you did the sting?
No, she never mentioned that to me.
She did not?
No.
Okay. And this sting that you've discussed was actually on September the 8th, 2014?
Correct.
So this would have been almost 3 months after Cooper died?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the sting. When you were questioned by Mr. Evans, you went through sort of your initial interaction with her. You went through talking about phone numbers, her showing you her pad where you saw some phone numbers.
Yes.
And then, after you went through all that, Mr. Evans asked you and showed you a picture and said, did you then show her a picture, see if she could identify?
During the time I was in the room, yes, I did show her a picture. When I showed her the picture, it was sooner during the conversation than later.
Okay. So sequence-wise, showing her that picture was almost one of the very first things you did.
I made contact with her, identified myself as an officer,
Okay.
advised her of her Miranda rights, told her why I was there, and showed her the picture at the same time.
Okay. All right, you have your report?
I do.
All right, so you would agree that, and you wrote your report right after you did the sting.
Correct.
So you would agree that what actually occurred that you reported in your report was that upon making contact with Ms. Dorr and identifying yourself as an officer, you advised her you wanted to speak to her about a possible client that may have called her and met with her sometime in May 2014 for escort prostitution services. Is that right?
That's right.
So you would agree, you've come in, you've got her dead to rights on solicitation, you read her Miranda, but you tell her, hey, we're not going to arrest you for anything. Correct?
Correct.
And I believe your words were she was, did you say panicked? I don't remember is that how you described her, that she was panicked?
Yeah, she seemed very surprised.
And almost immediately what you did was you showed her a picture and told her that that this may be somebody that you met with, 4 months earlier, right?
Yes. About 3 months earlier.
All right, you advised her that you wanted to show her a picture of a person and see if she could identify him or if he looked familiar. Then you showed her the bookend photograph, and you showed her the one that Mr. Evans showed you.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, the same picture.
Correct.
Okay. Now, typically, when we do some sort of identification, we have 6 photographs so that the individual can see if they can pick out the person, right?
In a typical show up or lineup, yes, we would show six separate pictures in a sequential lineup, meaning separate lineup. This was not a show up or a lineup. I already knew who Mr. Ross Harris was. We already identified him, and this is merely to confirm and corroborate the phone numbers that we found on the call log history.
Okay. Well, you didn't really need to show her a photograph to confirm the phone numbers, did you?
Yes and no. Yes, you don't need to, but sometimes people associate stuff. Like if she may remember the number, replace the face with that number, she may remember.
Okay. But you just showed her one photograph to see if she could remember a phone number matching that photograph from almost 4 months earlier.
I showed her the picture, and I asked her if he looked familiar, she remembered if it was associated to the number or not. I showed her the one picture again because it wasn't a lineup or a show up. I was there merely trying to confirm and corroborate whether she remembered the number and the person.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is, you could have just looked at her phone records to do that, couldn't you?
I could have, but she actually volunteered to show me those records. I didn't ask her for that, and I actually told her that she didn't have to, and she went out of her way to show me on her own accord.
And you showed her a single photograph of Ross Harris before any of that happened.
Correct. I did show her the one photograph that was just shown.
Okay. And there wasn't any emergency in this sort of sting. You had plenty of time if you wanted to do it by the book. You could have gotten other photographs and shown her a 6-pack lineup, couldn't you?
There was no urgency in this because he was already in custody, But I think the big factor, the main factor for me in doing this way was we had already identified him. We knew who he was. It wasn't like I was trying to find out who he was. I already knew who he was. I already knew his phone number because we got it from the call logs. We knew the phone was assigned to him from a Home Depot, and we knew that the phone call had been made from his phone to Ms. Dilworth's phone. So I didn't do a lineup or show up because I already knew who he was.
Okay, so there was really no purpose in showing her a photograph right off the bat, and was there?
Again, sometimes people associate different things.
All right. I believe your testimony was after y'all went through the, after you showed her the photograph, the identifying characteristics, she said he was white and fat and dumpy.
Correct.
All right. Nothing remarkable about eyes or hair or mole on his chin or disfigurement of his ear, anything like that?
No, she stated again that she recognized him about 90%. The only 10% was the clothing, but she did say she recognized him.
Okay. And you actually got a chance to see her phone records?
I did. I saw her phone records on her pad, her tablet that she showed me when she brought him up real time when we were there.
All right. And the target number that you were looking for, what number was that?
The target number ends in 9087. That was Mr. Harris's cell phone number.
Oh, the whole number.
Okay. 470-864-9087.
And that's the target number you were looking for?
Correct.
470-864-9087?
Correct.
And that's the number that you saw on her call log
That's correct.
for May the 31st?
That is correct.
And you didn't see that number anywhere else in her call log, did you?
When she scanned through their call log, that's the number she brought up at that time period.
You didn't see that number anywhere else in her call log, did you?
In the forensic call log,
In any call log?
the number I was given, 470-864-9087, I was given a specific date and time of the phone calls, and I was told to investigate those. I didn't look anywhere else. I didn't dig into any of the other forensic analysis or anything like that. It wasn't my job.
You testified she showed you a tablet.
Correct.
That was her call records, right?
Correct.
You didn't see that target number on any date except May the 31st.
Correct. What she showed me was May the 31st, and then she turned the tablet off once we looked at it and confirmed it.
Okay. When you testified in direct, and then when you testified right then for me, you only gave the last 4 digits.
That's because on the prior court appearance, I was asked, or I believe you asked me not to give the whole number out. I don't know if it was for security reasons or what, but I just gave you the whole number.
Okay.
It's in my report.
Is it because you've been made aware that that was not Ross Harris's phone number?
I was told that it was a work cell phone.
Okay. That's why you only gave the last 4 digits today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and you would agree, you've had a chance to review your report, you would agree there's nothing in your written report about the odor of marijuana in her room?
Correct.
Have you had an opportunity to interview or have any contact with her after September the 8th, 2014?
No, that is the only time that I spoke to Ms. Dilworth.
Okay.
Once I left her room with Sergeant Wheeler and Agent Panchame, I never spoke to her again.
Okay. And you testified that you made an attempt to record this procedure that you went through where you showed her a photograph, a single photograph, and your recorder malfunctioned.
I attempted to record it using the transmitter recorder that we use in operations. I showed her the photograph. That wasn't part of the procedure because I wasn't doing a show up or lineup. In the report, you certainly agree that what you said to her was, I then advised Ms. Dorr that I wanted to show her a picture of a person and to see if she could identify him or if he looked familiar. Correct.
But you're now testifying that this was not an identification procedure.
Correct. Or if he looked familiar
Okay.
to her. Like I said, people associate different stuff. I already knew who he was. It's not like he was a John Doe or somebody I didn't know. I already knew who he was. He'd already been identified.
Well, we understand that you knew who he was. But when you walked in that room, you had no idea if she could identify him, correct?
True. Again, it wasn't a show up or lineup. I wasn't charging him with a crime. I wasn't charging her with a crime. I was asking her whether she was familiar with his picture, and then also asked her about the numbers and the information.
So when you told her that I wanted to show her a picture of a person and see if she could identify him, or if he looked familiar, in your mind, that's not for the purposes of seeing if she could identify the person in the picture.
Correct, because I wasn't charging him with a crime. I didn't need her identification to know who he was. I already knew who he was.
Thank you.
Couple quick things. In terms of what Mr. Bellotti shared with you about, there might be some discrepancy about times and anything. Did you do any independent investigation about how the times actually matched up, or did you leave that to other detectives?
I left that to other detectives. I did not go into that.
You just noted it for your report so that they can investigate that further?
Correct.
Now, you talked about not doing any reports about any discs. Have you seen reports today that others did mentioning you in their reports because they gave you the discs?
Yes.
Okay, and whose report did you see that in?
I saw that in Detective Yeager's.
All right. And then the final line of question, I think Mr. Kilgore was trying to point something out about a report and the number you put in the report. I'm partly at fault here too. Do you have the number that you put in your report associated with what you believe was defense work phone?
Yes.
Okay. And then I want to show you, this is page 35 of the report, which is a list of the evidence. Looking at that, is that number off? Here you go. Page 35. Looking at that, might the actual work number be 564 instead of 864?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So just an error on your part.
Yes, possibly, yes.
Regardless, the number that you saw from Ms. Dover, that was in the records you were given associated with the defendant's work phone.
Correct.
All right.
You testified here in this courtroom about a week ago, correct?
I think it's been a couple weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
And at that time, you testified that the target number, which you observed on Ms. Dorr's phone records, was 470-864-9087. Isn't that true?
Correct.
And today, under oath, you testified that the number that you saw on her phone records was 470-864-9087.
Correct.
Okay? Are you now saying that that's not true?
I'm not saying it's not true. What I'm saying is Mr. Evans just showed me the computer with the evidence sheet, and the digit is off.
The digit is off on the
one
evidence sheet
digit.
is wrong?
The one digit is off.
Well, you're standing by your testimony that you've given under
Right.
oath twice, correct?
Correct.
The number you saw was 470-864-9087.
Correct.
Thank you.
In terms of the number, would the record perhaps be the most accurate for what the phone number is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to change your testimony then?
Excuse me?
Would you like to change your testimony?
No, sir.
That you testified twice under oath about the number that you observed?
I'm aware of what I testified to, and I know that there was a discrepancy, and he just showed me the sheet
When did you become aware of a discrepancy?
right now.
Thank you.
We don't have anything further, Judge.
You're free to go. Thank you. Next witness.
Your Honor, this next witness is the one we spoke about earlier this